Every week this season has given us some incredible games, and this weekend is no different, as there are a number of fantastic matchups, many that can determine conference title games along with potential playoff seedings. Here are my 10 most anticipated games for week 6 of the college football season. Before I get to my top 10, make sure to smash that subscribe button and turn on those notifications if you're new to my channel. If you're watching this video, odds are that you love college football, and odds are you aren't subscribed to my channel, so make sure to subscribe to one of the best college football communities here on YouTube. I'm posting college football videos every day during the season, so make sure to subscribe so you never miss a video. Also, make sure to drop a like on this video as well. It helps out with that YouTube algorithm, and it helps share the video with more college football fans. For this list, I'm not going 10 through 1 in level of anticipation. These are just the 10 games I'm looking forward to this weekend. We'll start with one of the most underwhelming Red River shootout games in recent memory. Both Texas and Oklahoma are going into this game 3-2, and both of these teams aren't ranked for the first time in many years. Both of these 3-2s though are pretty different, as I guess you can make the case Texas has had the better season. The Longhorns lost to Alabama by only 1 point, and then they fell to Texas Tech in overtime. If you look at Oklahoma, they've lost their last 2 games as they've allowed nearly 100 points in back-to-back contests. Plus, it looks like Oklahoma is going to be without their quarterback Dylan Gabriel. Meanwhile, Texas is going to be getting their quarterback Quinn Ewers back for this game. So there's a reason that Texas is favored by a touchdown in this contest. It's still one of the best rivalries in all of college football, and I'm sure this is likely going to be an exciting game still. But the fact that both of these teams aren't ranked and both of these teams aren't exactly fighting for a Big 12 title spot as of right now, this game certainly doesn't have the hype as it's had in years past. But I wouldn't be surprised if this turns into one of the best games of the entire weekend. Don't look now, but Tennessee is the number 8 team in the entire country. They're 4-0, and they're going on the road to Death Valley to take on LSU, who cracked the top 25 for the first time all season. Tennessee has been one of the better offenses in all of college football through the first month of the year. They're averaging just under 50 points a game, while averaging nearly 600 yards a game as well. They've had some pretty impressive victories so far to start the season, and this is going to be another tough test for them. Meanwhile, with LSU, after losing the first game of the season to Florida State in heartbreaking fashion, they've responded with 4 really solid victories. After it looked like it'd be a long year, Brian Kelly has turned this thing around, and LSU looks like they might make a run in the SEC. I don't think either one of these teams is going to be playing in the SEC title game this season, but if they're able to pick up a conference victory in this matchup, it is certainly going to help their chances later on this year. If you would have looked at this weekend's slate before the season begun, I guarantee this matchup would not have been on your most anticipated list. But this is probably the most exciting game of the entire weekend. Number 17 TCU travels on the road to number 19 Kansas, as this is College Game Day's Game of the Week. TCU is 4-0 on the season, and they're coming off some really impressive victories over SMU and Oklahoma this past weekend. Meanwhile, with Kansas, they're somehow 5-0 on the season for the first time in 13 years, and they're also ranked for the first time since 2009. I don't think many people were expecting TCU or Kansas to be making a run at the Big 12, but here we are nearly halfway through the season. This is a battle between 2 insanely good quarterbacks, as Max Duggan has been fantastic this season for TCU, throwing for 1,000 yards with 11 passing touchdowns. Meanwhile, with Kansas, Jalen Daniels has thrown for 1,000 yards with 11 passing touchdowns and being the team's leading rusher as well. Both of these offenses are some of the best in all of college football, and their defenses have been really impressive as well. I think whoever wins this matchup is going to be in the driver's seat for playing in the Big 12 title game later this season. Unfortunately, this isn't a battle between 2 top 25 teams, but this should still be a really good game. After losing back-to-back games, Arkansas travels on the road to take on number 23 Mississippi State. Arkansas got off to a great start, winning their first 3 games and climbing inside the top 10 of the AP poll, but they lost to Texas A&M by 2 points, and they lost to Alabama last week in a game that ended up not being all that close. Meanwhile, with Mississippi State, they've won 4 of their first 5 games and really have some impressive victories under their belt. Their lone loss of the season is on the road at LSU, but that was a game that Mississippi State really should have won. This is going to be a matchup between 2 really good offenses and 2 really good quarterbacks in KJ Jefferson and Will Rogers. For Arkansas, they're looking to avoid their 3rd straight loss and try to get back into the SEC fold. Meanwhile, for Mississippi State, they're trying to move to 5-1 on the season and continue to climb up the rankings and potentially potentially make a run at the SEC. It looks like the Bulldogs are a 10-point favorite, but I think this is going to be a really close game that might come down to the final possession. It's a shame that this game doesn't have a lot more hype, as Alabama is a 24-point favorite over Texas A&M. Things were looking good for A&M after they took down number 13 Miami and number 10 Arkansas, but they got embarrassed last week at Mississippi State. This Aggies team looks like they're falling apart, and they couldn't have picked a worse time to have their matchup with Alabama. The Tide are 5-0, and they're the number 1 team in the country. As of right now, I'm not sure if Bryce Young is going to be playing this weekend, but I don't think it's going to matter all that much. After what happened in this meeting last year, I don't think Nick Saban is going to want to mess around, and I think Alabama absolutely destroys Texas A&M in this game. The Aggies are just trending downwards, and I think Alabama is going to win this game by at least 30 points. Now, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe Texas A&M is able to stick around in this game, but I don't think this one is going to be close at all. We have a really good Pac-12 matchup this week, as number 11 Utah travels to number 18 UCLA. We know Utah is one of the better teams in the entire country and probably the best team in the Pac-12, but UCLA has come out of nowhere this season and is 5-0. Now, the Bruins haven't necessarily played anybody this season, as their first 4 games were arguably the easiest 4-game stretch to begin the season, but this past weekend against number 15 Washington, UCLA essentially dominated from start to finish. I know it was only 1 game, but the Bruins looked like a legitimate threat in the Pac-12. Meanwhile, with Utah, they've been fantastic ever since their Week 1 loss to Florida. They've dominated their last 4 games, and they've looked like one of the better teams in all of college football. Cameron Rising has really turned things around, and this Utah offense is one of the best we've seen from them over the last decade. This is going to be an insane battle between 2 really good quarterbacks and 2 really good offenses. Also, both of these defenses have been pretty solid as well so far this year. I think Utah is the team to beat in the Pac-12, but UCLA might have enough in them to pull off this upset. If the Bruins are able to pull out the victory, you can make the case they've been the best Pac-12 team so far this season. We have number 16 BYU taking on Notre Dame in a neutral site game in Las Vegas. It's been a pretty underwhelming season so far for the Irish, but they've won their last 2 games after losing their first 2. After a close game against Ohio State and a close loss against Marshall, they took down Cal at home and picked up a really impressive victory 2 weeks ago on the road at North Carolina. Meanwhile, with BYU, they're 4-1, with their lone loss being a blowout on the road at Oregon. They still have a very impressive victory against Baylor and have won their last 2 games, scoring 40 points in each contest. This is going to be an interesting matchup, as I don't really know what to expect from either team. I get BYU is number 16 in the country, but I don't know if they're worthy of that ranking. Meanwhile, with Notre Dame, they're 2-2 and have been pretty underwhelming this season, but I think this has a chance to be their best game of the season so far. If you look on paper, this should be a game that BYU wins, but I don't know, there's just something that's telling me Notre Dame wins this game. Either way, it's going to be a great battle in Las Vegas, and I think this is going to be a really exciting matchup. Both of these ACC teams are coming off a loss, but this is still one of the better games of the entire weekend. Florida State travels to number 14 NC State. Both teams are 4-1, and like I mentioned, are coming off a loss last week. Florida State lost at home to a really good Wake Forest team, and NC State lost on the road to a really good Clemson team. NC State is still making a playoff push, as they're ranked number 14, and a win can help them climb up the rankings some more. Meanwhile, for Florida State, they fell out of the top 25, but a road win over a top 15 team might help them climb into the top 20 next week. Jordan Travis and Devin Leary are 2 really good quarterbacks who are really going to battle it out in this game. It's a pretty even matchup, as both offenses are nearly identical and both defenses are nearly identical as well. NC State does have the advantage being at home, but this is still a really good Florida State team that I really think wants to get back in the win column after their home loss last week. USC is still undefeated and they're ranked number 6 in the country. Meanwhile, Washington State is 4-1 and they're a borderline top 25 team. Had it not been for the Cougars' epic collapse a few weeks ago against Oregon, this would be a top 25 team that would be 5-0 on the season, and this matchup would be more hyped. Still, I think this is a really good game that's getting slept on a little. The Trojans are a 12.5 point favorite, but this is a really good Washington State team. I know USC is 5-0, but I'm still trying to figure out just how good of a team they are. They haven't really played anyone good this season, with their best matchup being against Oregon State, a game in which they barely won at the end. Outside of that, they've played a bunch of crappy teams, so I think this is going to be the first true test of the year for USC. They're a 12.5-point favorite, but I wouldn't be surprised if Washington State hangs around, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Cougars pull off the upset victory. I think their offense has what it takes to hang around in this game, and I think their defense is going to cause some problems for USC. So if you want to put a team on upset watch, I think USC is that team in this matchup. We're going to wrap up today's video with another Pac-12 matchup as number 12 Oregon travels to Arizona. Ever since losing in week 1 to Georgia, Oregon has looked like one of the better teams in all of college football. They took down number 12 BYU in dominating fashion, came from behind and pulled out the shocking victory on the road at Washington State, and they dominated Stanford last week, winning by nearly 3 scores. Bo Nix is all of a sudden turning into a Heisman caliber quarterback, and this Oregon team looks like they have a potential playoff push in them. Meanwhile, with Arizona, they're only 3-2 on the season, but this is still a much improved Arizona team than we've seen in years past. They're likely going to be making a bowl game this year, and I think they're going to cause some potential problems for Oregon. In years past, this is a matchup that Oregon always seems to struggle with. Over the last decade, Oregon has really struggled when playing in Tucson. Now, maybe this year they don't struggle at all and they win by 14 to 20 points, but I wouldn't be surprised if Arizona is able to hang around in this game. For every college football team, there's always that one place where whenever they travel to, they just seem to struggle. For Oregon, this is that game. With the way the Ducks have been rolling, I feel like a lot of people are probably just looking ahead to their next matchup against UCLA, but don't count out this Arizona team pulling off the potential upset. Well, those are the 10 games I'm looking forward to the most this weekend. Which game are you most excited for? Or was there a matchup not included on today's list that should have been on here? Let me know in the comment section down below. Before you leave, make sure to smash that subscribe button and turn on those notifications if you're new to my channel. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I'm posting college football videos every day during the season, so if you're a college football fan, this is definitely the place for you. Also, make sure to drop a like on this video as well. It helps out with that YouTube algorithm and helps share the video with more college football fans. Plus, it only takes a second to do. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video.